Let's move on because over the past few months there have been many critics and opponents of Boris Johnson who have said that the government has been doing things policy-wise to distract from the Prime Minister's problems and also made announcements to shore up support for him. Tory MPs, in fact, were the latest to complain in the Northern Research Group after Boris Johnson, as they say, pulled out of a speech he was supposed to be given on Friday in Doncaster and went to Kyiv in Ukraine instead. In response, Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, tweeted this: helping Ukraine win and trying to help at home are linked. Part of the inflation we see comes from gas and food prices, which are partly driven upwards because of this conflict. Amazing how an important trip can generate so much conspiracy, and you can fill in the blank there. But rubbish, anyway. I'll suggest that one just for now. So can I suggest to you the trip to Kiev, the introduction of imperial measurements, the Rwanda policy in terms of asylum seekers, the introduction of grammar schools being talked about. Can they all be distraction? Or are these legitimate policies, Sarah?
So I think we have seen a series of dead cat announcements that are designed to support and bolster Boris Johnson and to distract us all from 12 years of Conservative failure. That is true.
Including
On
Ukraine?
We absolutely support the government's actions in Ukraine. And of course, Ben Wallace is right to link all of these issues together. The issue with Ukraine that I find peculiar is the idea that someone other than Boris Johnson in the Conservative Party wouldn't have exactly the same policy. If Jeremy Hunt was Prime Minister, if Keir Starmer was Prime Minister, I suspect we would be following exactly the same lines. So on that front, it isn't. It is a slightly peculiar argument that some people seem to be putting forward, that he's the only person that would follow this policy when he patently isn't.
I mean, imperial measurements, introducing those, was that really a serious policy that had been on the government's mind for so long that this was the time to introduce it?
No, if it was, it wasn't something that anybody had spoken to me very much about. No, I mean, look, that's an example of something where a bit of extra flexibility, a bit of rule relaxation wouldn't hurt. But I do take your point that I think there's an issue here that because the Prime Minister has had to have a reset, because we had this vote of no confidence a little while ago, the danger is that everybody sees everything through that prism. And even when you have really sensible policies, things like what we're doing with Ukraine, the danger is that they get viewed through that prism and people lose sight. You get this sort of Westminster conspiracy mill sort of churning away, and people lose sight of the fact that actually, you know, some of these things are being done for exactly the right reasons, all the way through because they're the right thing for this country or for, you know, peace in Europe, whatever it might be. And the danger is that therefore they get sort of devalued because of this sort of Westminster conspiracy mill thing.
The Prime Minister has devalued it all, hasn't he? I mean, it's his.
That really wasn't what I was saying. Really wasn't what I was saying.
You know, breaking of the rules, which, you know, as you know, is a real issue, and it does percolate through everything that we then talk about.
Well, is that what's happening, Anne? I mean, you were in politics an awfully long time. You know, governments do a mixture of shoring up support with policies that might appeal more to the party's base, as well as the sorts of things that John has just set out, legitimate policies that are good for the country, as he put it.
Well, as you rightly say, I was in politics for a long time, 23 years to be precise at Westminster, and I've seen this before, and it's called you can't win. You know, if you don't introduce bold, eye-catching policies like Rwanda or grammar schools or whatever it is, then people like me, who are yelling the face down, saying, what do we have Brexit for? Get on with it. Get some really good policies going out there. You've got another 2 years. You know, people like me will be saying that. Then if you do have the bold policies, then other people say, oh, well, it's only in order to shore up Boris. So it's a sort of no-win situation. And my question to the Tory party is, do you really want to win? Because if so, forget this sort of nonsense and get on with the policies.
So you still see him as an electoral asset in that sense then, Boris Johnson?
I think he can be. I think he's been very damaged by what's happened, but I think he can recover. I think he can be. But the point is that the party, the Conservative Party, has really got a choice. It either goes on to the next 2 years in endless squabbles and criticisms of Boris, whether overt or covert, or it gets together as a fighting force to win the next election. It's choice. It's choice.
John, maybe Anne's thinking of you as part of the Conservative Party. Yes, there you are.
Just to be clear, so I think that's absolutely the right way to frame it. We have got to get on with the job of delivering. I mean, there's in the government's defence, we have had a pandemic for 2 years. There have been other things going on. But she's absolutely right to say, now we're out of the pandemic, we've got the second half of the Parliament to go. We've got to put the foot down on the accelerator.
So you're 100% behind Boris Johnson?
I can't pretend that because I was one of the 148 who voted the other way around.
Exactly, and you've just resigned from your job.
Yeah, absolutely. But my point is that he has won himself, and people like me need to both accept and respect the result of the vote of no confidence. I've said so publicly before, I'll say it again today. We have to accept and respect that result. We have to give the Prime Minister a chance to do the reset that he said he wants to do, give him that space, and give him the chance and support him if he will put his foot on the accelerator and get on with the kind of reforms where Anne and I think, would be in 100% agreement about the fact we've got to get on with this.
So we've had a Conservative government for 12 years. We've got 6 million people on the NHS waiting list. We've got 1 million people on the housing waiting list. We've got the highest tax we've had in 70 years. These are big issues. Chartering a plane that never takes off and costs millions of pounds is not the answer. Harking back to some, olden times by bringing back, policies of imperial measures and the like is not the answer. We have huge talent in this country, huge possibilities. We have our universities, our language, our people, all these things. The government could be gripping all the talents that we have and coming up with a policies that would push our country forward, not going back to weights and measures and trying to blame everybody else for the problems that of their own making.
Well, I mentioned, John, that you had obviously resigned from your role as anti-corruption czar. At the end of last week, the Prime Minister's ethics advisor, Lord Geidt, also resigned, revealing his frustrations in his resignation letter. The Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorries, was on LBC Radio last night answering a caller about this very issue. Let's have a listen.
Hi, Joe. Well, you call him Lord Geidt. I think the rest of the country had never even heard his name before and used to call him Lord Geidt. And I don't think they give a fig who replaces him or even who he was or what he did. So I suppose the substance of your question is who should replace him. I don't know, actually, and I don't think it should be one individual because the whole, Lord Geidt, Lord Geidt, sorry, I call him Lord Geidt.
Geidt.
Actually, most people up north don't call him Lord Geidt and don't know who he is. But he complained so often about the amount of work that he had to do that I don't think one person can probably do the job.
Maybe this government kept him busy.
Sarah, so what's your reaction listening to that, John? I mean, is that the way a Cabinet Secretary should be speaking about Lord Geidt?
Well, I think the important thing now is to make sure we get somebody who is going to be unafraid to speak truth to power in as his successor and to make sure that they have the powers, they need a few extra powers, in order to make sure that there is always, doesn't matter, current government, future government, we need to have somebody in that role who will run up the red flag if there is an ethics issue. And it's vital that therefore you can have 3 people doing it, I don't care, but you've got to have somebody occupying, or some group occupying that central, essential position to make sure that every government in future, no matter which party is in power, flies straight.
Is she right that no one gives a fig about Lord Geidt and the fact he was there and resigned?
I would respectfully disagree with Nadine about that, because I think that you've only got to look at the polling, you've only got to look at the way that this is played out to see that there's been quite a lot of damage inflicted on the Prime Minister over this. That's why he's stood up and said he wants to have a reset. And therefore I think it is wrong to say that you can just ignore it. It's not, it's real.
Do you think it should be 1 person, 3 people replacing Lord Geidt?
I don't know how many people, but I do think that when you lose not 1 but 2 of your ethics advisors, there's a real problem there. And I don't think you can brush it away. I don't think you should be blasé about it. I think it is about standards. And, for me, it matters because it's about trust in politics. And, we think about the issues on the table. They're massive. And we need people to trust that our government and our politicians are doing the right thing. And if you don't tell the truth, if you act below the standards, that has a problem. And going back to the kind of point about distraction, I think we have had a barrage of nonsense coming out of the government. The point Ad made about good policy, it is not good policy. I wouldn't mind if it was bold policy that I disagreed with, but it's half-baked nonsense that for me is there to distract. It is there to distract from the failings of the economy, a massive cost of living crisis, and a government that isn't getting a grip on that. So Boris's woes is about trust and about lies and about Partygate, but it's also about the central issue of the day, the government not having an answer on it, not having an answer to the cost of living crisis, not doing enough, and people are feeling it, and in the end that will be his undoing.
Do people give a fig, Anne, about Lord Geidt and his resignation?
I don't think they care too much. They sort of, I think, absorb it subconsciously as though, this is just something else that's going wrong. But one might actually look at the cause of Lord Geidt's falling out with the Prime Minister, and it was over the Prime Minister wanting to protect British steel. Well, I see no reason why, particularly in our post-Brexit world, a Prime Minister should not want to protect British steel. And I think this is the sort of discussion we need to be having. As for who should take over, I think you need at least two people. You need one who's got a knowledge of Westminster, who understands practicalities, who doesn't take a purist interpretation of every last comma and dot. And you need somebody also from the outside who just brings a more purist attitude. And that is what you need. You need the balance. And I don't see it, and I don't know what the PM will do.
All right. Just bring you this news. We've been told that the Prime Minister has had a minor routine operation relating to his sinuses. The operation was first thing this morning, back in Downing Street, around 10 o'clock. It was obviously in the early hours. And while we're talking, that came out of lobby when the political journalists asked the Number 10 spokesperson about all the various stories of the day. One of them was about this rather curious appearance of a report in Saturday's Times claiming that Boris Johnson tried to get Carrie Johnson, his now wife, the Chief of Staff job at the Foreign Office for £100,000 a year when he was Foreign Secretary. It appeared, and then the story disappeared, which seems to have attracted even more attention, understandably. They were asked about it at the Number 10 briefing. Spokesperson said, "We don't comment on issues referencing Boris Johnson's career before he became Prime Minister, but point you in the direction of denials from Carrie Johnson's spokespeople about the story." Does that satisfy you, John?
Well, I have no idea if the story is right or wrong. As you said, it apparently appeared for a brief period in the... was it in the Times?
It was in the Saturday Times, yes, and then deleted.
And then the Guardian got excited about it. So I have no idea if it is true or not. What I would say is that this sort of stuff would have absolutely no airtime. We wouldn't be talking about it on a programme like this if there weren't the questions about Christopher Geidt leaving, if there weren't the questions about integrity. So it just comes back to the point that we've got to draw a line under this, and by drawing a line under it, the only way to do that is to fix the thing up, find Lord Geidt's replacement, and to make sure that this sort of stuff can't be an issue, so that therefore questions like this are unimportant and never bother anybody.
All right, I'll use your phrase. Let's draw a line under it and talk about